Okay, am I audible?
Yes, Atharva, you are audible.
Okay, so let's start. Welcome to day 2 of the Basic ML workshop. Hello, everyone. So, this is the question asked in the last session. We were asked to decide whether the two problem statement are to be solved using classification or regression algorithms. So, I hope you have guessed the correct option. The correct answer is option 3. That is, to treat problem 1 as a regression problem and problem 2 as a classification problem. We have to evaluate the sale of an item in the first problem. So as we predict a real value, first problem will be solved using regression machine learning algorithms. In the second problem statement, we have to classify the customer accounts into two categories, hacked and compromised. Hence, it comes under the category of classification. I hope this helps you differentiate between classification and regression. Now, Kshitij and Tanishq will discuss the various aspects of deep learning architecture and why do we employ them.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Kshitij, you are audible.
Okay. So I'll discuss about neural networks, which is the heart of deep learning. So what are neural networks? So you might have heard about the word neural networks. So it comes basically from biology, which is in the brain. These are just cells which uh, pass on information as electrical information or chemical information between different neurons so that it helps us think. So, how does it relate to the neurons that we use in machine learning? So, in machine learning, basically, all these neurons are just mathematical entities and they're not like physical connections or something like that. So each of these circles that you see here in the right picture, they are neurons, and each of the neurons are just placeholders for some numbers, and the connections are some kind of a mathematical relation between the numbers. So, these neurons are made into layers for our convenience. So each layer is like a collection of these neurons. So you can see the input layer, it will take the data in as numbers. So a computer cannot understand any other type of data other than numbers. So these input layers take in numbers, and the output layer gives the answer or the solution for that problem. For example, it may classify some kind of thing into uh, output 1 and output 2. Now coming to the hidden layers, these are the layers in between input and output. That is why they are said to be hidden. So they are the number of hidden layers actually correspond to the depth of the layer. So more hidden layers it means that the neural network is deeper. So that is it. Now we'll discuss a classic example of how these neural networks classify things. So this example is uh, recognizing handwritten digit. So a computer cannot understand like whatever we write. So we need to make an application so that it takes a handwritten digit and converts it into a number, machine number. So you can see here there are a few handwritten digit examples and the labels. So let us see how it does. Since a computer cannot understand, let us say, images, so it needs to be converted into a set of numbers. So here is how graphics works. Any image is composed of an array of numbers from, let us say, here I'm considering grayscale numbers, black and white numbers. So a number 0 represents black and 255 represents white. So everything in between are a shade of gray. So this is how computer graphics creates images with numbers. So now we have converted into an array of numbers. So we need to feed it into the neural networks. So here is the example. So those numbers, it will be in a two digit, I mean 2D array. So that 2D array is made into a single dimensional array. So if the, let us say, image has some 28 by 28 size, so the total number of neurons in the first layer or the input layer will be 784. So that is 28 times 28. So that is how input layer receives information. So that information is transferred to the further layers by that connections. So and finally we get the output. So each neuron will hold a number. That number is actually called an activation. So here you can see some of the neurons getting lit up in green. So those are where the activations are, right? So finally, in the output layer, you can see that whichever has the most green activation, that is the actual answer. So let us see how, what are these connections first. So these connections are just mathematical, as I said. So each of the neurons in first layer is connected, I mean, neurons in input layer is connected to one neuron in this, I mean, each neuron in the first layer. So that is the thing. So each connection is called a weight. And these weights are just W1, W2, these are just numbers again. And we add them all like with multiplying with the activations. So these are the numbers corresponding to the neurons. And finally, we add a constant that is a bias, which dictates the like, overall relevance of that layer. And we also use one function outside. You can see a sigma sign here. That is the activation function. That actually removes the unnecessary information, or sometimes if the activation is negative, it removes that. So let's see how activation functions come. So these are few of the examples of activation functions. The sigmoid is what I am explaining right now. That is why the sigma sign. Others are more like better. In nowadays, ReLU is actually used, and also TANH is used for some applications of hyperbolic tan. So these are the activation functions. So these activation functions like act upon like this expression. So finally, this expression that you get is the activation of the next layer. So that is how information propagates from one layer to the other. So you can see the first expression. So on each neuron in the first layer, you can write the expression for the same, and combining everything, you get this big and scary matrix, and you can again compress it into a small formula that you see in the end. So mathematics apart, we'll come to how neural networks train. Okay, so this training is something like a practice session. Like it gives like training gives a lot of let us say practice problems to the neural network so that it learns the thing. So here you can see it gives a 5 and the neural networks predict something. Initially it will be some nonsense. So when the training happens and finally it becomes better and better. So this training is a process where weights that I told, those connections, those values will be altered. So initially it will be unknown. So finally, after every training, those values will be assigned to those connections. So uh, how to find the values? That is a question. So we'll see the result of what the neural network gets. So if it gets some rubbish, then we'll see where to decrease it, where to which connections to remove. So here, uh, this function is like I mean, it is like a result of the prediction, or uh, the answer, the difference between the actual value and predicted value. Let us say here, for 5, it predicts some other other digits get activated. So we can subtract those things and generate some kind of function. You can see here there is a function. Our main goal is that we should decrease this function. That is because we should uh, make the actual value and predicted value almost same. So that is why we need to decrease this loss function. So in order to decrease this any function, you may have learned that we can graph it and find the global minimum of that function, right? So the same thing we'll be doing for a multi-dimensional function. So that is why we need a 2D or a higher dimensional graph. So the graph looks like this. So the uh, the dimple that you see, that is the global minimum, and we have to find it. So how do you find it? So computers use something like algorithms that find those global minima. So let us see an example of that. This thing is called stochastic gradient descent. Don't worry about the names, and don't worry about the math. So it will be there for your reference. So what it does is that uh, it starts from some random point, and in every iteration, it goes to the global minimum. So that is how it finds the best values for weights and bias. So that is how we get these weights and bias values. So these values are then put back into the neural network, and again the training happens. So this is like a iterative process. So you do training. The neural network makes mistakes. You correct those mistakes. So that is how the mistakes are corrected. So there is another term called back propagation. So here, whenever there is a mistake, that which mistake, like that information goes back. So there is one algorithm which does that. So it what it does is it finds which of the weights needs to be changed. It changes it accordingly. So that is how training happens. And all of these algorithms, if you want to learn about it in a deeper manner, like this math and all that, uh, you will be requiring a lot of mathematical background in these. So basically, it requires a lot of calculus. So that is the whole thing behind deep learning, is that it is wholly mathematical and stuff. So okay, this is how it is. So this whatever you are seeing is the very uh, basic understanding of a neural network, and this is the most basic examples for a neural networks. You can improve this and make it into, like, there are bigger algorithms and architectures which are much more suited for many types of examples. So this we'll be improving this, that Tanishq will explain. So before that, there is an advice that you need to don't ignore the mathematics of your first year courses. These are very important in learning deep learning. So you have calculus and linear algebra. These are very important. So now Tanish will tell about all the um, convolutional neural networks and other interesting stuff. So
Hello and good evening, everyone. Myself, Tanishk, and I will be explaining the convolutional neural network part for today's workshop. Kshitiz, can you just stop sharing? Like I will share from my side. I think there is some
yeah, right.
problem
Okay.
here.
Yeah, you can share, Tanish.
Okay, so sorry for the interruption. We'll start. Okay. So convolutional neural networks are basically the branch of neural networks which are mostly used in the visual imagery part of our tasks. So visual imagery, as the name suggests, many tasks like related to computer vision only, like image classification or image captioning, or like many tasks related to images. Okay, so those are covered under this CNNs. So CNNs basically how they make our task easier, like as Kshitij suggested. So they are like they take the important features out of the images already. Okay, so the image that we have, if we send only the important features to the neural network, then the computational power is also really reduced, and our like it becomes very convenient for the computer as well as the developer to code it, because only the important features are being considered, and the accuracy is also improved to a very great extent. So CNNs that the so how do CNNs work? So CNNs, as I just said, they extract the important features. So how do they do that? So basically, there are some filters which are a part of the convolution. So what they do that the filters they take the important edges or corners or the shapes from the image. So basically, if you observe this seven here, so the first filter we can see that it because of this first filter, this part of the seven is brightened up, and because of this filter, this part, and so on. So like the four filters are brightening up the different parts of this number seven, which is a handwritten image taken from the MNIST dataset. So, so basically, that's what the convolution does here. Okay, so it is taking it's considering the most important parts and using these filters. Okay, and as you guys already like understood that the neural networks can be deeper and deeper. Okay, it depends on the number of hidden layers that you use. So it's like if you go deeper into the neural network, it can also learn it can also learn to identify the whole image itself. So initially when we start, so it may just be able to identify the edges, shapes and corners, but later on it learns so much that it can also recognize different objects. Like in this case, the whole number 7 it will be able to recognize. And when we go to other data sets like eyes, flowers or hills, like depends on the data set. Okay, so what is the math behind these convolution neural networks? Like how do they extract the important features? So the first step is convolution. Okay, so convolution is basically, as I just said, filters. So filters is a very vague term, so exactly what term we use when we code is kernel. Okay, so kernel, what it does, it performs a dot product, like it traverses the whole image. As you guys might already be knowing that images consist of a lot of pixels. Like each pixel has particular value, and the brightness of that particular pixel depends on that particular value. So you can consider this as an image, and it is all the pixels are having some unique value which corresponds to the brightness of that particular part of that image. So what this kernel will do, it will traverse the whole image and it will perform the dot product. Okay, so it will perform the dot product, and then convolution, this is how the convolution takes place, and we get another matrix. So initially this is the raw image matrix, and we perform the convolution using the kernels, perform the dot product, and this is the resultant image matrix that we have got here. So this is the first step of convolution. The next step is max pooling. So we got some image matrix here. So we got some important features. Now the next step that is that if we can reduce the size of the image matrix, of the resulted image matrix that we have here. So is there any way to do that? So max pooling does that. Max pooling, in a way, it reduces the spatial size of the convolved feature. Okay, so this is suppose this is the convolved feature. So this is the image matrix after convolution. So what we'll do when we apply max pooling, it takes the maximum of the part that which is which it is traversing currently. So this matrix, so when we take this part of the matrix, 3 is the largest number here, so that's the maximum here. The next matrix, 3 is again the maximum here, so 3 again will be taken. So in that way it reduces the spatial size. So from 5 cross 5, now it has become a 3 cross 5 3 cross 3 matrix. So decreases the computation power. Obviously when you have to train for lesser pixels, then obviously it will require less computational power. So dominant features are obviously taken using these convolution neural networks. And as it is discussed, like as it is discussed, that we flatten the image and then we put it into the neural networks. So why didn't we do it in the case of images? Because obviously we performed convolution and pooling before. And why did we do that? Because the number of parameters that we'll have to consider when we send the image to the neural network will be lesser because of convolution and max pooling, because they have taken the important features and they have also reduced the size of the image. So we do convolution. So this is a very good diagram that basically tells us how the images are classified. So this is handwritten image of 2, which is taken from the MNIST data set. So this has to be labeled as a 2. So how does it do that? So this 2 is taken, and then convolution is happening here. So 5 cross 5 kernel. So that filter which performs the dot product, so that is a 5 cross 5 matrix, and it traverses the whole image and produces some matrix. And then we take the max pooling ends, we take the maximum to reduce the spatial size of the image, and then so it goes on and on. Convolution, max pooling, convolution, max pooling. Like it depends on the task that you're doing, how many convolution layers and how many max pooling layers you have to apply in your network. So followed by that, obviously you will do activation because you need to send your network to the neural network to train. But now the change is that it is only taking the important features required for training. So computational power has reduced. Okay, so the next we'll go to some coding part for today. So this is the first code for the day. We'll classify some images, handwritten MNIST dataset images. So these these images look like this, like 0 to 9 images are there. So we'll write a code for a model which will classify these images. Okay, so let me reshare my screen. Okay, so this is the code here. So we are taking the images from the MNIST dataset. So this is the loading part of our model. Okay, so MNIST dataset is basically a very famous dataset where a lot of researchers have gathered a lot of handwritten digit images, and about 60,000 of them they have gathered, and like they have taken they have provided the open they have provided it to everyone as an open source thing so that anyone can use it and make their own handwritten digit classification models. So we have used it here. So we have loaded it. Xtrain, Ytrain, Xtest, Ytest. So this is basically the training data set. So this is the data set Xtrain, Ytrain on which the our model will train, and Xtest and Ytest is basically the part of the data set on which we'll evaluate our model, like how well it is performing. Like it has trained already, but how well it is performing, we'll test it using these data sets. Okay, so how the images in this data set they actually look. So this is how they look. So as you can see here, 9 images I've printed, I've shown here using the Matplotlib library. Okay, and so these are the first 9 images shown here. Okay, so this is how they look, and when we convert them to grayscale format, so this is how they look in grayscale format. So here I have added an additional argument, cmap equals to plt.getMap gray. I didn't add it here, so it's showing the colorful images, but now I added that extra argument here, and now they are grayscale. So this is how the images in the dataset look. And the next step is basically what is the type of the data set. So numpy arrays. Okay, so numpy arrays are like as Kshitij already discussed that these neural networks, they can only play with numbers. Okay, so they cannot play with anything else, so they will only play with numbers. So like that's why we should only give them data in the form of numbers. So the data in the form of numbers, mostly in Python we use numpy arrays. Okay, so the first image of the training data, it is this is the 5 is the first image of the training data, and it is labeled as correctly as 5 in the training examples. Okay, and this is how an numpy array looks. Okay, so that particular image in the form of numbers, so this is how it is represented, the form of numpy arrays. Okay, so this is a very important part, normalization part of our code. So like each image consists of 3 image channels. So and each 3 image channels basically are RGB, so red, green, and blue. So these are the 3 image channels of which like the whole image is constructed. So and each image channel is basically having 8 bits. Okay, so to the power 8 is basically 256. So 0 to 255 we take. So the numbers here, as you can see, they are lying between 0 and 255. Here you can see in this NumPy array, they are lying between 0 and 255. So what we are trying to do here, we want to squish them from 0 to 255 range to 0 to 1 range. Okay, so that's why we divide by 255. So when we do that, those numbers are being squished into the range between 0 and 1. Okay, so the size of the training data set. Okay, so the shape, using the dot shape argument of the NumPy library, we can obtain the shape of the training data set, which is 60,000. So 60,000 images are there, and 28 and 28. What does this 28 and 28 represents? That is the size of each image in the data set, 28 cross 28. So 28 pixels cross 28 pixels. That's the size of the images. And then I reshape them again into this -1, 28, 28, 1. So I reshaped the images. So initially it was consisting of 3 image channels, which was a red RGB, red, green, blue, as I already explained you. So to simplify our task, what I am doing, I am converting those 3 color channels into a single color channel. So that's why I've put this one here. Okay, so and this -1 basically I'm telling the TensorFlow library that we mostly use for deep learning. So I'm telling that TensorFlow that this is 60,000. So like -1 is treated as 60,000 here. Okay, so and if you have any doubts that why this -1 I've written here and how does this correspond to 60,000? So in the next step, I've printed the shape here again. So I wrote -1 here, but the like the machine is taking it as 60,000 only. So -1 is being treated as 60,000 here. Okay, and the shape of the each image now, just a single image channel, as I just reshaped it here. So the single image channel is 28 cross 28 cross 1. So initially it was 3 and now just 1 image channel. Now what we do, so this was all about the pre-processing of the image. Okay, so what we did that we converted those images into NumPy arrays, and then we resized them, we normalized them. So that was all about that. This was all done so that our model can train easily. Okay, so that the data can be the data in an easier form. It can be fed to the model. So that's why we did all this pre-processing. Okay, and now we make the model. So what is the model here? So the first layer is the convolutional layer. As I just discussed, this layer filters 25. Okay, so 25 such kernels will be used by this model in the first layer. Okay, and the size of the each kernel will be 3 cross 3, and the activation at each layer, as just discussed by Kshitij, ReLU. Okay, so that's a max of a comma 0. F of a equals to max of a comma 0. That's the function for activation that we are using here at this layer. And the input shape we have to define obviously as 28 cross 28 cross 1. Okay, so then we do max pooling using a 2 cross 2 matrix, and then again we do the convolution, again max pooling, again convolution, again max pooling. So this I did according to my requirement. Okay, so the number of convolution layers and the max pooling layers, it can be changed depending on the application. Okay, then obviously we have to flatten, okay, before sending it to the neural network, to the multi-level perceptron. In other words, you can call it the neural network. So this is the convolution max pooling part done, and now we send it to the neural network. Okay, and so these are the 64 nodes are there in the first layer, and finally we have 10 layers here. Why 10 layers? 0 to 9 we have 10 digits, so that's why we have 10 nodes at the final layer of this model. Next we compile. So what does compile mean? It defines a loss function, optimizer, and the matrix. Okay, and the metrics. So loss function, what is loss function? It is like similar to cost function. Okay, so loss function is basically it calculates the losses at each step. Okay, it calculates the losses at each step, whereas the cost function, it calculates the average loss, the overall loss. Okay, so average loss of all the things considered. Okay, so what is a loss function? Here I have, like, here it is again, I have written here. So obviously we have to, like, it is like it is a way of representing the difference between the actual value and the predicted value, and the difference we need to minimize. That's the main task of the model. Okay, and optimizer. So optimizer is something that tweaks our learning rates and weights when we are training. So if it feels like the model is going haywire, it is like not doing what it was supposed to do. Okay, so it is like jumping, like the gradient descent that was recently discussed by Kshitij. There, like if instead of heading towards the lowest point, instead of heading towards the global minima, if it is like going toward the global maxima, so this is the person who will take care of it, who will decrease the model. Okay, you're going too fast. You need to slow down now. Okay, the weights are taking, like, the weights are not given in a correct manner. So this is the guy which will take care of it. Optimizer. Okay, it will tweak the learning rates and the weights and all the parameters like this, so that the model trains perfectly. So this is all we do in the compiler. Okay, so this is how we compile the model. Okay, so optimizer Adam I have used here, and the loss function is the sparse categorical cross entropy. So this is also a very big mathematical equation. Okay, you can search about it on the internet. Okay, uh, basically a way of representing the difference between the predictive value and the actual value. And the matrix. So in which form do I want the matrix to look like? Simple. I want them to look like in the form of accuracy. Okay. So how well the model is performing. So accuracy. Okay. So now I train it. Okay. So now I train the model using the fit function. Okay. So convolutional neural network, that's the name of my model. This is the name of my model here. And dot fit function I have used for training. So what it does, xtrain, ytrain, xtrain, as I just mentioned, it contains all the images in the NumPy format, and ytrain, it contains all the labels of the images in the NumPy format, and 10 epochs. So 10 times the whole data will go into it, okay, for training. Okay, so the first step, we train it. So what is this 1875? These are the steps per epoch. Okay. So steps per epoch are like you divide the whole training example, the number of training examples divided by the batch size. Okay. Some batch size you take like 32 or 64 or 256. So like we send our data in the form of batches to our neural network, and it trains like this. So in batches we'll send it, okay, for each epoch. That's how the training is done. So initially it was 92%, it kept on increasing. The final training accuracy is 99.5, which is exceptional. It is very good training accuracy just achieved by our model. And then we say that no, like, you have performed well, but can you perform well also on the data set which is not a part of the training data set? So can you perform well on the test data set? So now we have evaluate on the test data set using the dot evaluate function, and we get the accuracy on the testing accuracy we get as 98.57% as well. So that's pretty good pretty good performance by our model. So next, like we have made a model which is like predicting the stuff for us. So now we'll head to predicting the stuff. So we take an image from our test data set at the, like, this is the ninth image. Okay, so like zero indexing. So this is the ninth image that we are taking from the test data set. We are plotting it here. It's an image of a 5. Clearly we can identify it. But can the model predict it? So we use the dot predict function to predict, and then we take again So we generate a NumPy array again using the predict function, and we take the ninth array of that ninth NumPy array of that uh, predict thing that we are getting from the model. So these are the some values. So what do these values represent? So this you can say that each value corresponds to the digits from 0 to 9. So this value is for 0, this for 1, this for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay. So these value will increase if the model is more confident that this image is 0. This image, if the model is more confident that this image is 1, so this value will be higher. So we go on, and we see the highest value here is this. And what does this value correspond to? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this value correspond to the number 5. Okay. So, and then we ask the machine to compute the maximum of this array. So it is 5. Okay, so this is the highest value of this, and it corresponds to the number 5. So this tells us that our model has successfully predicted that this image is a number of is an image of 5. Okay, so that's how convolutional neural network works, and this is how image classification is done. This is a very basic task. Okay, as you go on solving, like, you will get more complex tasks. Okay, where you can apply even more complex neural networks. Okay, so this was all from my side. uh, now uh, Now Atharva will explain more about regression.
Okay, so am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. We will now understand logistic regression and solve a problem using this algorithm. Logistic regression is a predictive analysis algorithm and based on the concept of probability. We train the model to minimize the cost function. Logistic regression can be used in classification and regression problems, but it is widely used as a classification algorithm. You now know what a neural network with multiple hidden layers is. Logistic regression can be seen as a neural network with one hidden layer consisting of only one node. We will understand logistic regression through a problem statement. So, we are required to predict whether an account has a higher or lower risk of default by analyzing various details of the account holder. Now, a bank account defaults when you break the terms of the credit agreement and the creditor cancels your contract. This may happen when you fail to repay the loan before the deadline. It becomes problematic for the banks to recover the loan amount. Hence, predicting the risk of a possible default is very essential. We can assess this risk by considering the various characteristics of or parameters associated with a bank account, such as the annual income of the account holder, their age, whether the individual owns a car, their marital status, etc. We will train and test the model with a total of 50,000 entries. Each sample in our dataset has 12 features, as shown here. A label is assigned to each sample in the 13th column, named risk flag. Now, the process of preparing the raw data is the first step while creating a machine learning model. You know, one doesn't simply feed raw data to a machine learning model. We will now know how it's done. So, without further ado, let's go through the code. So, here's my Colab notebook. Firstly, we import all the necessary libraries. These libraries are used to call built-in functions. We will now read the dataset, which is a comma separated values, that is a CSV file using a function from the pandas library. So this green tick signifies that the code block has been successfully executed. Now here comes the data processing part. We'll now use the isNull function to detect any missing values in the dataset. And before that, we can also see the first few entries of the dataset. So here's our dataset with 50,000 bank account entries and the 13 columns associated with each sample. Here's the isNull function to detect if there are any null entries in this dataset. So as you can see, the result is false. That is, the dataset is complete and there are no null values. Now we will drop the columns ID, profession, city, and state as they are redundant and do not help in predicting the outcome. So here's our final data set that we will be using to train the model. It doesn't contain these redundant columns. Before we proceed, we can categorize the data into two types, numerical and categorical. Numerical data is used to mean anything represented by numbers, whereas categorical data generally implies everything else, which is in particular discrete labeled groups. Income, age, experience, etc. are numerical data, whereas house ownership, marital status are categorical data. We will separate the two data into two data frames. Now, as you can see, this is our categorical data. These three columns are included in our categorical data. Okay. Now, labels can be in the form of words or numbers. Label encoding refers to converting the labels into a numeric form to transform them into machine readable forms. We will do it using the label encoder function. Okay, so as you can see, you have encoded the label married as 0 and single as 1. The same is done for other features. After this, we will concatenate the 12 features of the two data frames into X. We will also create a data frame Y containing only the risk flag values. Here comes the splitting part. Now we split the 50,000 input data samples such that the ratio of testing samples to total samples is 0.33. We end up with 33,500 training samples and 16,500 testing samples. You might ask why not split the data in a different ratio. The answer is that I have experimented with other ratios such as 1:4 or 3:2, but the optimized ratio for the problem statement was 0.33. As you can see, the shape of the data we are giving for the training and the shape of the data we are giving for the testing. We'll now train the model with the 33,500 training samples. You can define the function using an inbuilt function. Okay. So we have successfully trained the logistic regression model. We'll finally test the model on the 16,500 testing samples that we have separated. Okay. We can evaluate the model's performance by various metrics such as accuracy, F score, etc. We can run this code to generate the model matrix, that is how our model has performed on the test samples. As you can see, the model's accuracy on the test dataset is 88%, which is pretty decent. You can further optimize your model by changing the model parameters, which goes in there. And this is all about logistic regression. And remember that to pre-process your data before feeding a model. So one doesn't simply feed raw data to a model. So before we end today's session, here's an indispensable resource for you to start your machine learning journey. This doc is a guide for a newbie as well as an expert. So do check it out. It contains the links of various machine learning resources that you can go through. Do follow our social media pages as we will be sharing today's slides by tonight. Thank you so much for listening. You may now ask your doubts.
You can unmute and ask if you have doubts, or you can ask in the chat box also.